Kia ora from Auckland, New Zealand. I'm Linda Rubens, and this is a summary of a session I did for the ADE Festival of Learning 2020. Basically, what I'm looking at is a couple of options for our students to give them some online versus continuous face-to-face learning. Obviously, there's not going to be one model or one solution because it depends on contexts. So once I've posted this, if people have got ideas and contributions, we'll put it all together and there'll be a couple of models that people can have a look at according to their context. So basically what I'll do is I'll give you an overview of what my context looks like and what a model for my students could possibly end up looking like. The types of questions that I wanted people to consider during the workshop were things like, what could a class timetable look like? Could you have some subjects that were all online, or even a day per week that was online? How would students demonstrate learning as opposed to just producing workshops or little tasks, but rather show depth of understanding in an online version? How do you, when you are doing things online, foster inquiry, independence in students where they're running the show themselves, and of course creativity, which is all important? How does the students take control of their learning as opposed to being directed by the teacher constantly? And then finally, and really importantly, how can we get teachers to use tech in a more innovative way? Okay, so onto my context. I've said that I am in New Zealand, and I feel that we are in a very fortunate position because we have managed the COVID situation really well. New cases are pretty low, and everything seems to be very, very well managed for now. However, what it has exposed is that anxious students are now highly anxious, and to the point that they almost not getting to school. In addition, the economy has taken a beating. As a family, we decided to do a road trip in the past holidays, and we were horrified to see the level of poverty, the amount of shops that are simply just shut up with a closed sign on their doors. And this must have affected our families, our students, and their well-being. So the why is the post-COVID, but I think it's gone beyond the post-COVID fallout. I think the whole design of traditional schools is under the microscope for a huge section of our communities, and rightly so. I have, to start off with, focused on the anxious and giving them some flexibility within their day and their week. But what about those students that just realize they work better with less school distractions? Or our top achieving sports stars who could do with the flexibility of starting school later or doing some work that is off-site. And of course, the multitude of reasons for the massive school avoidance. You've just got to look at my screen at the stats that we're sitting at the moment to realize that we have got underlying issues. So global pandemics and natural disasters aside, what about more flexibility, in the school day to cater for differences? As I said to start off with, the model will look different according to your particular context. It could be a fully online version for senior students, or one day a week where students were given the ability to work independently, or a hybrid of synchronous and asynchronous learning. The details need to be determined by the school. However, the model that you decide on, the time that you put into it, the outcome should be a more personalized approach. I know that one of the biggest arguments against online learning is that children need to socialize. But for the highly anxious, it is perhaps more detrimental getting them to fit the mold than it is getting them to socialize. For some students, this might be a temporary measure, just a way of maximizing learning and success, and then transitioning them back into the traditional format. COVID has exposed these problems We need to come up with the solutions. So schooling that is fit for purpose is what I am advocating. In New Zealand, as in many countries I'm sure, we have correspondence school. So why not just send these students in their direction? It is my opinion that correspondence school doesn't work because it is too static and feedback is not given in a timely manner. So students feel disconnected, disengaged, and isolated. So those are the issues. How do you make online learning engaging, fun, and still get students to feel a sense of belonging? These are the basic requirements, and on the surface, they look pretty simple. However, dig deeper and you realize that they're minefields of their own. For example, affordable and reliable internet. So those are the types of things we would have to address in our communities. Another thing is to change the mindset of teachers. So if you think that a video call is going to be able to replicate a classroom situation, you setting yourself up for failure. The online version is nothing like the real version. We have to approach it differently. Have you ever asked teenagers to unmute their mics and answer questions? It's near impossible. So those are some of the problems and concerns that we face. Now, for some people, middle school would be a stretch too far, but I'm going to look at middle school and say, perhaps if the numbers were quite small, you could combine year levels and teach them online in a combined version. For the senior levels, so for New Zealand, it's levels or years it's levels 1, 2, and 3, but it's years 11, 12, and 13. What I'd suggest is you start with the must-haves. So focus on their literacy and numeracy, get those out the way, and then delve a bit deeper. Perhaps when they get to the final few years, they could have a dedicated pathway so they know where they're going to transition to, and so you focus on those sorts of subjects to get them to where they want to go. I'm also suggesting if it was perhaps the model where it's 1 day a week, that 3-day weekend could actually benefit our economy, because if you've got a little bit of extra money and you can travel locally, you put in money back into your local community. But definitely what we should look at is having our timetable more flexible. Another model could be that core subjects are taught in small workshops and tutorials, where specialist classes are run as a kind of master class. So that's run across all year levels, and in that way, perhaps students will actually find their passion, which is something that we're all striving for. So those are kind of the models that I've been thinking about and toying with, but there's a couple of basics that we just can't get away from. And the one is balanced screen time. We've got to make sure that students and teachers are not staring at screens, because we know through lockdown how exhausting that is. Secondly, a detailed weekly schedule would be important, so you can't be available 24/7. It would have to be very demarcated times where you're online but you're just doing Q&A, or you're online for a video conference. Simple posters with instructions so families, students can follow the format very clearly and easily. And then videoed lessons. I've been a long proponent of having videoed lessons so students can access them when they need them. And I think that's something that we really need to upskill our teaching staff with, and get them comfortable with making videos so that they are available to the students. And then getting away from little tasks and multiple worksheets, but rather deep dive resources, and in that way foster their inquiry. In addition, I think if we could start being more flexible in our thinking in terms of the work that we're given, we could also become more flexible in the due dates. When a student is ready to hand something in, get them to hand it in and move on to the next thing. This would bring in assessment for learning. To help with perhaps parents' fears with this new way of looking at things, you could have an entry and exit diagnostic test. Very often I've found that the teacher's comfortable and feels that the learning is taking place, the student is comfortable with it, but it would be good to have the data to prove it, to say the parents. And then it's very easy to fall into the trap of these very good, very successful online maths and writing programs, which a lot of schools buy into, but that should be an add-on, that should not be the go-to. And then finally, home contact. That more than ever would have to be the closing link between the school and the students, is having that home contact so that they've got clear understandings of what the expectations are, that they've got a clear understanding of what the schedule would look like, and that those communication lines are very clear. And I'd like to just address that idea of socializing and connecting again. In this online model, I think it would be the role of the family to ensure that students still connect with peers and friends. I believe that for the anxious child, you take the pressure of face-to-face school away from them, even for 1 or 2 days a week, and they will feel in better control of their own environment. And then socializing could be something that they can take control of themselves. I started with a couple of questions. These are the questions that I think are vital. There were a couple of additional questions that came up in the workshop, and the one was, what about sport? What about that feeling of being part of a team? At our school, music and being in the band is really important. And I reminded this caller, or this person that had the question, it is not lockdown that I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting some flexibility within the week. So if a student has got a game on a Friday and that's their online day, well, they come to school and they play that game. They still train in the morning. It's not that you forcing them to stay at home, you're just giving them a couple more options. The other question was for practical subjects. How do you get around that? And again, I'd suggest that you do the practical subjects on the days that you are at school, and then you let students do their deep dives, find their passions on the days that they are off campus. There was another question where it was suggested that at enrollment, imagine that you were the school that was offering a bit more flexibility, how that could open up possibilities to families that live quite far. So in our catchment area or in our zone, we've got a lot of farming community students. They spend 2 hours on a bus getting to school and getting back from school. So at enrollment, you could go over these sorts of things, and I think it would be of huge benefit to a great number of parents and students out there. So those are a few more questions that I thought people could have a good think about and get back to me. And finally, these are my contact details. So obviously I'm on the ADE website. So if you are an ADE and you want to contact me through that website, I'm more than happy to start a collaboration. We were asked for starting a group, and I'm going to do that. Or if you're not an ADE and you are on Twitter, that's my Twitter handle, feel free to connect with me through there, or that's my email. And I really think we need to get a movement going. We need to rethink the very traditional way that we've approached things, and it should benefit both teachers, students, and of course their families. Kia ora.